Good evening. This meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of May 22nd, 2024 will come to order. Roll call, please.
Chairman Richardson.
Here.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Here.
Secretary Grant.
Here.
Member Childs.
Here.
Member Garad.
Here.
Member Faison.
Here.
Member Moscoso. Here. Alternate Member Findler.
Here.
Alternate Member Rogers.
Here. Okay, we do have a quorum. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We do have a quorum. From time to time tonight, you might notice I have a cough drop in my mouth. I'm suffering from severe sinus infection, and sometimes I lose my voice, but I'll try to keep it as much as possible. Before you go into approval of the minutes, I've been asked by Miss Karen Black of the Brevard County School Board to introduce our new member of Planning and Zoning.
Hello, I'm Karen Black. I'm the Manager of Facilities Planning with the Brevard Public Schools.
Okay, you don't have to do anything now.
It's good?
Yeah, it's good
Okay,
now.
sorry. I'm Karen Black. I'm the Manager of Facilities Planning with Brevard Public Schools, and I'm happy to be here tonight to formally introduce Miss Jacqueline McLaughlin. She is going to be our new school board representative to your board for the next 2 years. She was sponsored by school board member Megan Wright and unanimously approved at the May 14th school board meeting. And I have met with her and started to teach her in all things planning and development and school concurrency. So she'll be here and available to answer any questions that you may have pertaining to schools.
Okay. Welcome, Ms. McLaughlin. Would you like to say anything?
I'm just here to answer any questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next item is the approval of the minutes of April 3rd. Seems like forever since we met. Ms. Moscoso.
Yeah, I would like to make a change. It is listed that I am Secretary Moscoso instead of Member Moscoso. So if we could change that. I don't want to take Secretary Grant's position.
Well, you're council person, so.
Okay, there's one change. Any other changes? Anyone care to make a motion? Anyone care to press the button?
I'll move to approve the minutes as presented with the change.
And I second.
Okay. Any discussion? Member Garad?
Oh, I'm sorry.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes are approved. Chelsea, will you go over the quasi-judicial confirmation procedures?
Yes. All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to the procedures adopted in Resolution Number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary.
Thank you. There is no consent agenda items, is no old business. Before you start into item 9, new business, we have a request that item 9B and C be tabled. Brad?
Yes, items 9B and 9C are two separate action items by the same applicant. They have submitted to us a written request, which is part of your agenda, to table those two items to your June 19th regular meeting. So if you do table these, we'll need an action on each item.
Any questions of the commission? Member Garad.
Mr. Parrish, I'm going to have some questions if this is continued regarding the accessibility to the site for these requests on the matter involving the access on arterial roads or collector roads for the development site. And it's not apparently on a collector arterial, so the applicant I know has a transportation engineer that's provided a report. I'm interested in seeing how the city reacts to the proposal on the road that the access is taken from, and in the same instance, has DOT had any input to the request as it would eventually access Highway 50? And in some cases, in the background, it's something that the DOT takes up after the Planning and Zoning Commission would review the matter. In this instance, being familiar with some of this, I'm kind of concerned that I can get a report back from FDOT for the review regarding the access on that intersection where Windover Way comes out based on the traffic analysis that was submitted. And that's just to be heads up. I appreciate if they can have some staff here to respond to my questions.
I would recommend that based on the applicant's request to table this, that all those questions be brought up during that public hearing at the
I understand.
19th.
I just would like staff to have somebody here that's in communication as opposed to the applicant's agent representing the applicant. I'd like to have someone with staff here. Thank you.
Anyone care to make a motion that we table this item? Member Childs?
I'll make a motion that we table items 9B and 9C. Do we have a date in mind, I guess? Or, oh, we have to do it separately, you think? Do we have to table them separately?
I would actually recommend that we first get consensus to rearrange the agenda.
Okay.
Is there consensus we discuss items B and C at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
There is. Now, your motion.
And then individual
Individually.
decisions on each agenda item.
Okay, I make the motion to table item 9B, small scale comprehensive plan amendment, SSA number 3-2022, Bristol, Titusville.
Second.
Till our
Sorry.
next meeting, or, I don't know. Is there a,
Do we have a date
The
certain?
applicant requested to table this item to the June 19th, 2024 P&Z meeting.
till then?
Okay.
Second. Sorry.
Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Roll call vote?
Member Garad,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Childs.
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. So that item has been tabled, and what about item C?
I make the motion that we table item 9C, comprehensive plan regular amendment CPA number 2-2024 Bristol Titusville transmittal until the June 19th meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Faison. Member Childs.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Yes.
Member Garad.
Yes.
Member Moscoso.
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. So those items will not be heard until the June 19th meeting. And, but you're allowed any discussion under citizens to be heard at the end of the agenda. Next, we'll go to item A, which is mini warehouses in RC zoning.
So item 9A, which begins on page 10 of your packet, is related to an ordinance to allow a mini warehouse in the regional commercial zoning district. Section 3437 of the city's code states, "City council and any property owner or as duly authorized agent may request an amendment to any section requirement contained within these regulations. Amendments include changes, additions, deletions, and shall be processed in a same manner as a rezoning request. Any such proposal that affects the provisions of the comprehensive plan shall also be considered a comprehensive plan amendment and be processed pursuant to this chapter.
Brad, you're kind of mumbling. Would you speak up?
Sure, you can. So the applicant is asking through the city's code to change the code. The way that's done with a private initiative or private request is through a rezoning process. So it's not an actual rezoning of property, but basically through this process, they're asking to change the code regulations. So this is not a city-initiated ordinance. This is a privately initiated ordinance. The city received an application to amend the text of the city's regulations to allow mini warehouse in the regional commercial RC zoning district without the stipulation that the storage be located in an enclosed, air-conditioned building. In addition, the applicant is requesting to allow a mini warehouse development to exceed the maximum building coverage in the RC zoning district from 30% to 60%. Page 12, you see the applicant's application. On page 17 was the applicant's initial request and proposal to how to change the code. We took this information and turned it into an ordinance based on the current code and based on some discussions with the applicant as far as what their real intent is and our understanding of that intent is, and that's on page 29 of your packet. So this is the proposed ordinance, page 29 of your packet. You'll see that they're proposing to change section 28-214, mini warehouse of the city's code. Currently, a mini warehouse is allowed as a limited use in the regional commercial zoning district. You'll see that in a table there with the letter L, meaning a limited, meaning it's permitted with limitations. So it does not require a conditional use permit. You'll see the definition of mini warehouse. On the next page, page 30 of your packet, you'll see the standards for permitted use with limitations. And it says here, in the regional commercial zoning district, mini warehouses are supposed to have access to each storage unit shall be from within an enclosed air-conditioned building. The applicant is suggesting the following change, or from an exterior door internal to the site. Further down in those same conditions, they're not proposing to make changes to paragraphs B, C, and D, but they are suggesting to add paragraph E, which states that a maximum building coverage of 60% would be permitted just for this type of use in that zoning district. On page 31 of your packet is the RC zoning development standards. So you can see the footnote that they're adding on paragraph, section 28-315, paragraph C, intensity and dimensional standards, specifically for building coverage maximums, percent of lot area. And it says 30% is the maximum, but they put a footnote in there, number 4. And if you go to the bottom of that same page, page 31, you'll see that footnote and states, except as otherwise provided in section 28-214, mini warehouses. That is referring to that increasing that building coverage from 30% to 60%. On page 26, the applicant did provide, in addition to their application on page 21 through 24, some data related to properties that are in the city. I'll leave it to the applicant to describe that information. They also included a map that's on page 25, and I'll leave it to the applicant to describe that. For purposes of our presentation, I'm just going to describe our staff report and a recommendation on pages 26 through 28. So in the background on page 26 of your packet, which is the first page of our staff report, we stated that the industrial uses are typically located away from residential areas and more than likely will not be in commercial areas. That was our take on this. In 2014, the city attempted to prevent the encroachment of industrial uses in commercial areas with the adoption of Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Policy 1.9.9G. which specifically prohibited light industrial services and warehousing M1 zoning districts in the commercial high-intensity land use. Prior to 2015, mini warehouse was only permitted in an industrially zoned property. That's M1, M2, M3. They were not allowed in commercial zoning districts. That year, the city received a separate request to allow mini warehouse in a commercial zoning district. The first time we received that request, it was to allow them in a community commercial zoning district. That's the CC zoning district. The staff objected to that. We didn't support that. So then the applicant suggested maybe putting it into a regional commercial zoning district. The staff, based on their request and what city council agreed to, was to propose a limited type of use. So it'll allow, what we did was we proposed to city council, and which they ultimately adopted, a mini warehouse as only inside an enclosed building and an air-conditioned building. As you understand, most of you are probably familiar with how mini warehouses typically are the roll-up doors and they're open from the outside. A lot of mini warehouses are now these indoor buildings, and they have one main building. You go inside and everything's air-conditioned. That was one of the stipulations that we proposed in that ordinance several years ago, with additional criteria, which I've already described, and that were adopted and put in the code. We currently have one property in the city that utilized this limited use, and that is off of Cheney Highway. They converted an old Kmart building into an indoor air-conditioned building, mini warehouse, in the RC zoning district. Bring you to page 27 of your packet. That's page 2 of our staff report. The paragraph there, it says the intent of the restrictions, I'll just read here, was to protect the aesthetics of major entryways into the city and protect abutting residential neighborhoods while more fully utilizing larger regional commercial sites, such as big box stores. The regional commercial zoning district has a minimum 2-acre requirement, and it's primarily for big box or large retail commercial uses. We further stated that the commercial zoning districts are intended to serve the needs of the city with retail, restaurants, and various commercial uses. They are typically located in commercial quarters and adjacent to residential areas. Currently, one enclosed air-conditioned mini warehouse exists on Cheney Highway in the RC zoning district. Mini warehouses, as they're traditionally known, with the roll-up doors that are open to the outside and are not air-conditioned buildings, currently require a conditional use permit in the M1 and the M2 zoning districts. In 2023, Ordinance 49-2023 amended the code to require a conditional use permit in the Highway Industrial Infill M3 zoning district, the Downtown Mixed Use District, Midtown Subdistrict, and the Regional Mixed Use Industrial Park, RMU 500 districts, if located within 500 feet of residential uses or zoning. There are no limitations for an enclosed air-conditioned building in the industrial zoning district. So they could, in those industrial zoning districts, put an enclosed air-conditioned building without having to go through additional limitations. We further stated that the city's comprehensive plan, future land use policy 1.8.1 states, sites for industrial development shall be located with convenient access to the major transportation corridors and should have access to air, water, or rail transportation facilities. The major transportation corridors include such roadways as I-95, US 1, State Roads 405 and 407. Major air facilities are located at the Space Coast Regional Airport. It should be noted that the Cheney Highway is not included in the comprehensive plan with an industrial policy, although there are currently two industrial zoning districts located along this important entryway into the city. The proposed change of the limitations to permit mini warehouses, which are not within an enclosed air-conditioned building with one common entrance to all units, may be considered as a change to the commercial and residential nature of the Cheney Highway corridor and the intent and purpose of the RC zoning district. We are concerned with the gradual change of the RC zoning district into an industrial district. Concerns center on the use of the RC zoning district for industrial uses, such as mini warehouse constructed in the traditional layout of individual buildings with separate entrances, garage doors to each unit, rather than units being located with a single enclosed air-conditioned building. Issues raised by the request include visual and noise impacts to neighboring residential and commercial uses, resulting in a change to the character of the area. Should council wish to consider the proposed change, staff recommends that limitations or conditions be established that will address these issues. We have not proposed any specific limitations if council does support this request. On page 28 of your packet, you'll see a comparison of the existing zoning districts of where these uses are allowed and what the applicant is specifically proposing. Another thing I just want to bring up real quick is that we also see that the commercial corridor and the commercial zoning districts are primarily to allow for uses that serve the city directly with retail uses. And so there's a lot of activity that happens along there. When you put a mini warehouse on a piece of property that is tended to be commercial, especially on a major corridor, which our code and our comp plan is traditionally looked at as an industrial use, it becomes more of a dead use, basically. It's not an active use. And those kind of uses are typically relegated to certain areas that are primarily, according to the city's comprehensive plan and the code, as in those industrial areas. So that's the last point I wanted to make. I'll try to answer any questions you have about this, and the applicant also is here to answer, make a presentation and to answer any questions.
Brad, I have a question for you. Do you see this as happening a lot in Brevard County? Recently, Channel 6 News had a story on it that the city of Palm Bay was proposing a moratorium on these storage units and car washes to make sure they're not in retail commercial areas. Is this a growing trend in other cities?
I have not looked at other cities to see what trends are going on there, but I am familiar with what was going on over in Palm Bay. We did reach out to Palm Bay, and we were told that their Planning and Zoning Commission, I guess, considered that type of moratorium. When it got to City Council, they pulled it from the agenda, so they didn't even consider or even discuss it. And my understanding from after that is that there are no plans to bring it back for discussion.
Member Charles.
On the standards for permitted uses with limitations where it says, you're adding the language on A where it says access to each storage unit shall be from within an enclosed air-conditioned building or from an exterior door internal to the site. I'm trying to imagine this, and I'm having a hard time understanding what that actually means for some reason. I don't know why I'm having a problem with it, but so an exterior door of the building or internal to, so an exterior door that's inside of another building, is that what it's saying? I don't know. I guess I'm not understanding that part, that language.
I think the applicant can probably better describe that.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's in the ordinance, though.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll listen to them later.
Member Grant.
Mr. Parrish, on page 27, line 23, you mentioned that there's currently 2 industrial zonings on State Road 50. Could you enlighten me on what they are, where they are? Because I can't seem to locate them.
The old Kmart.
The old Kmart?
And I don't know what the other one.
Yeah, what's the other one?
I believe one of them is it's an office of some sort.
Industrial?
Yeah, so offices are allowed, so like contractors be allowed in that zoning district.
All right, okay.
If you give me a moment, I'll see if I can find more information.
Is that on the opposite side of Highway 50, like across from the former Parish Health and Fitness Center? I believe that would be,
One on the south side of Cheney. If you give me a moment, I can give you more specific information, though.
while you're looking that up, Member Garad.
I'll let Brad finish looking that up because I have a question for him.
I guess my question was really, why are there any industrial on 50 in the first place?
I don't have an answer as to how those got there, other than that there was an ordinance that was used in order to put them there. But that is okay, so there's one off of, it's 2459 Cheney. It's on the south side of Cheney. It's across the street from Zoltan, which is a
Next to
intersection.
Parish Health and Fitness, exactly what I was saying.
Yes, you're correct. I'm sorry. Yes, it's just southwest of the Parish Health and Fitness. You've got it open. Oh, right. So it looks like the one on that south side is warehousing, distribution, and trucking terminal. That's how the property appraiser has assessed it. It looks like, according to the picture from the property appraiser, that there are roll-up doors, so it may be many warehouses with offices there. Again, I don't know much about that particular property. I'd have to come back to you with more specific information.
That's all right.
Member Grant?
I'm finished.
Okay. Member Rogers?
Brad, would this be a sort of a one-time exception on this particular property? Or do you think that this kind of is the camel's nose under the tent and creates a precedent that would then spread to other zonings of this type?
This change like this into this particular zoning district will affect every property that has this zoning.
Right. And the second question was, I was a little shocked to hear that, maybe I don't quite understand this, but that there was a 30%, can you tell me about the 30% to 60%? Certainly seems kind of bold to double the percentage, but is the 30% simply that of the entire property, only 30% can be actually covered by the footprint of the building? Is that what that is?
That's correct.
So a move to double the request, is that somewhat unprecedented?
I couldn't find a basis for it, so that, again, I think the applicant probably could better describe that, but what they're proposing is that it would be very specific to this particular use within this zoning district.
Okay.
I do have an answer more about the other two properties. They've been industrial since before the citywide rezoning in 1993. So it looks like the one that I mentioned to you was built prior to that year, prior to the citywide rezoning. Can you tell me the year maybe? There is another one further west, which is near the I-95 interchange, and it's got a Pet Boys use on it. So that looks like a car repair or manufacturing, which is another use that would be typically found in an industrial zoning district.
Yeah. Member Garad?
Thank you. Mr. Parrish, with the comment earlier from the other member regarding the 30% building coverage and your opening comments about regional commercial supporting big box development, the summation I get is the 30% is yielding a less intense compatibility relationship because there is going to be a potential residential relationship to the property sites, which are either community commercial or regional commercial. And when you see the big box, in the same instance, 30%, a lot of the big box areas are covered with grade parking because of the nature of the square foot ratio to parking ratio. So you leave yourself with large development sites with buildings that look compatible to the large acreage it takes to support the parking arrangement made for that building. Economy of scale, so as to speak. And in the application, the applicant wants to do two things. One, deviate from the restriction that is also, it appears to me to be a compatibility issue, having an enclosed building with a central access point rather than multiple doors being used by multiple tenants all at once, visible perhaps by geometry to the site to residential communities. And at the same instance, increase the percentage to the building coverage, both of which look to me to be more essentially trying to rid the restriction that's based on compatibility as opposed to some other ratio. Why would 30% be there at all? Why wouldn't it be 50%, something that's more typical to that ratio, floor area ratio as well? So in my question to the staff and your recommendation on this not approving it, is it really the central part of this is the compatibility subject matter?
Yes. So there's, to further answer your question, of the various commercial zoning districts, you have the regional commercial, underneath that, a more or less, rather a less intense commercial called community commercial. Below that, tourist. Below that, neighborhood commercial, and then there's office professional. The office professional and neighborhood and commercial zoning districts, which are they allow smaller type retail and office uses and allow them on properties that are much smaller, actually have a more restrictive building lot coverage of 25%. So I think to answer your question, that might be the intent, is about compatibility of scale.
And to follow that up, so if you envision the big box, in my mind's eye, I'm looking at Home Depot. And I'm looking at a building, if I assumed Home Depot or perhaps Lowe's as a big box, met those standards of 30% building coverage, and the external development, which is to the building, the parking lot, is the sea of asphalt. With this proposal, you could take the building that you see as Home Depot, double the size of it. You wouldn't need the parking because many warehouses by their nature don't require the parking commercial retail does, but you'd have this very intense building that would be adjacent and incompatible in most instances to residential communities and disproportionate to even what commercial development would have, as I mentioned, 50% building coverage. And if, in my mind's eye, again, I see a development site, 5 acres and 3.7 acres is a building, that to me does not seem compatible, and certainly the current code supports that preserving compatibility, where this proposal would be, in my opinion, very incompatible. And that is why I asked the questions regarding the 30, 50% and seeing a site that wouldn't need parking at the level you see with a Home Depot or a Lowe's as a big box, but conversely, you would have a really big box on a disproportionately 40% site in remainder, whatever that would be, retention and parking and the other subordinate. Thank you.
Member Moscoso.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback a little bit off of what you were saying and it being compatible with single-family zoning. As I look at the chart you guys provided, which I appreciate that, I did notice one property did stick out to me, and since we're changing this in the ordinance, it would change for all the different properties. It's one off of Garden Street. I think it's the Gregory Nelson, and I think Mr. Honeycutt also represents that property as well. A little bit of history on that. I wasn't on the P&Z when that got approved, but I think it actually got denied first, and then they came back and they switched it from, and someone might correct me, but it was single family and they switched it to regional commercial. And so it fits all of the qualifications for these, if the ordinance is changed for this mini warehouse, and it does, it is adjacent to a single family subdivision. And so my question would be, let's say this does get passed through and we have the single family neighborhood right next to it. Would there need to be a conditional use permit, or what would help protect the single family neighborhood with having a storage unit right next to them? And I'm kind of I looked through all these different properties and that one really stuck out to me because it was recently rezoned to RC zoning.
So is your question, what limitations would we want to introduce?
So
if
say
to
we
allow this?
do add that into our ordinance with the single family, and let's look at that property specifically. It's right next to a single family neighborhood. What, would there be extra buffers, or would they need to have a CUP in order to have that, or it would just automatically be put in?
I mean, you would have to, if that's the route we want to go, I would recommend that you would come up with certain limitations that you think are appropriate in order to allow council to be able to accept this and to help control any impacts this use might have adjacent to any residential. This is not to say that there are examples in the city where there is a mini warehouse next to residential, and they may have been approved prior to the current comprehensive plan policies or even the current zoning, and there might have been grandfather, I'm not sure. I don't have answers for those. But I know what the city's comprehensive plan and the code says that we try to relegate these in industrial areas now. So when someone's asking for a new one to be approved, these are the criteria and the policies we want to try and impose, basically, as far as controlling those issues.
Because I feel like we had a discussion about mini warehouses, and I'm not sure what that zoning was, but we required a CUP. And so I'm just trying to figure out how this would work in RC zoning.
Well, in the M1 zoning district right now, I believe even just recently, we processed a conditional use permit to allow a mini warehouse in the M1 zoning district, which is a light industrial zoning district. And that was a traditional style mini warehouse. So if this is going to be expanded inside the RC zoning district, I would recommend requiring the same process with some additional limitations if it's going to be expanded in the commercial zoning district, a traditional style mini warehouse.
Thank you.
Any other items for discussion? Okay, before we open the public hearing, I think Member Aton and Vice Chairman Aton and Member Faison will be the only people on the commission to remember this. But before it was Kmart, it was the Cook's department store. And they both, with the dissolution of Kmart, that place stayed vacant for a number of years. And when the secure storage came up, with a lot of improvements to the landscape and the parking lot, they promised the community it would be individual parcels in front, retail parcels. And they drug a flatbed truck up, and Mayor Diesel was there, promising everybody that would be the location of a Chick-fil-A, which I haven't seen so far. And secondly, that other piece of industrial that's across from the former Parish Health and Fitness Center was before it was those many warehouses, it was the Moon Drive-In Theater, which showed a lot of X-rated movies. And the neighborhood would rather have many warehouses there than what they had there.
Shameful.
Yes, it was. Okay, we'll open the public hearing and we'll ask the applicant to come up and speak.
Thanks, I need to.
I have some handouts for you.
Thank you. They don't have to vote tonight, but they're alternates. We have all this in the packet.
I'm with the law firm of Lacey Lyon Rosenka in Rockledge, Florida. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, which is Insight Property Group. Did you have And we do have a PowerPoint for you, but first I do want to talk a little bit about the staff report and some of the comments we've heard. The first thing I did hand you is something I found off the internet, and it's from a investment company. And frankly, the question of whether self-storage is commercial or industrial has come up. And in my experience, especially dealing in other cities in Brevard County, it's considered a commercial use. In fact, in Brevard County, it is a BU1 general retail use. Now, they do have conditions, just like your code does. So I think to claim that all mini warehouse is industrial is a misnomer. I don't believe that's true anymore. They've come a long way. Some of them look like apartment buildings. Some of them look like retail shops. Some are one story. So the newer ones are much nicer than the older ones. The newer ones are commercial versus industrial, in my opinion. Here with me is Elias Slaby with Insight Property Group and Rodney Honeycutt, the engineer of record. Mr. Slaby has been with Insight Property Group for a long time. He was the ones that purchased the Kmart and turned it into the storage facility secure space that's there now. He says he didn't promise a Chick-fil-A. They did wine and dine them, but just couldn't get them to come. So just to clarify, I know I've been working up here about 15 years, and I've heard about Chick-fil-A being requested all the time. Regarding the staff report and the recommendation of denial, we did come up and talk with Mr. Parrish, and Mr. Parrish was not in favor of this proposal from the very beginning. So there wasn't any give and take. There wasn't any suggestion of making this a conditional use and putting additional conditions. We submitted it, they reviewed it, recommended denial, and here we are today. But we do have a PowerPoint to explain the need for the requested change, show what this external door looks like, show why this is being requested, and it's already there. It's already next to residential. There's been no complaints for, 4 or 5 years, 6 years. So this is to add on to it to clean up that, in my opinion, an ugly looking, unused, vacant parking lot that was in front of Kmart. So that's why we're trying to get the change here. Again, I do not believe that this is an industrial use. This is not asking for an industrial use to be encroaching in commercial use. Regional commercial allows this type of use. It's not an industrial use, it's a regional commercial use with conditions. As you see on that awkward document I gave you, which has 28214 mini warehouse, that's the existing ordinance with the red is what we're requesting the change. Standards for permitted uses with limitations. This allegedly was adopted in 2015. I say that because I wasn't here and I don't know, but Mr. Parrish has said that, so I believe that. They could have done anything. They could have added architectural standards. We're fine if you want to add more conditions and if you want to make this a conditional use, if that's what's going to allow them to expand to use more of their property. Currently, they only use 22% of their property. It's a very large piece of property. They have tried, as we'll show you and discuss, they have tried to market it since 2019. And if they do sell it, there's only a very small piece of property that can be used because of that 30% coverage limitation. So there's not much that can be done on that front space, and no one has been interested since 2019 in purchasing it. Regarding the lot coverage, I agree that some of that is because of the parking. The 30% is to usually limit what can be there because of the parking needs, such as a Cook's or a Kmart. So the 30%, other than that, doesn't have any real basis. Industrial has no lot coverage, yet you're allowing many warehouses in commercial, but you have a lot coverage. So it seems inconsistent and arbitrary. That's why we're only proposing to change it to 60%. And actually, as you'll see, we do have a site plan, and we can go down to 50% if that's more palatable and it's something you all believe is a good thing to do. This is not going to change the character of the regional commercial or this area. The storage is already there, and this is going to be going towards Cheney Highway and away from residential and towards the commercial road. There's an issue of visual and noise issues if this is allowed to be changed. I don't quite understand that because this is an expansion onto Cheney Road. And as you'll see from the map, all of these other RC that could possibly use this ordinance are on the outsides of town. And that's generally where you have your industrial and your mini warehouses. If there are noise issues, that's a code enforcement issue, a performance issue. And if you do have a visual concern, we can add conditions into this or make it a conditional use. Regarding the list that I've provided to you, this is in your packet. We went through, with the help of city staff, and mapped every regional commercial property in the city. There are 73 of them, one of which is this particular property, which is number 23. The acreage that's highlighted, that's how many are over 2 acres, which you have a mini warehouse in regional commercial, and that is 37. However, only 9 of them are vacant. So truly only 9, including us, so 8 others could possibly be, make use of this revised ordinance. And as the map, as you see, all of the little squares with the numbers, those are all of the properties that relate to that list that are over 2 acres that could possibly have a mini warehouse. The one that's on, looks like it's on US 1, number 46 in the middle of the page, that's already a developed site. And there is one mistake on the bottom where there's no number, that's actually 67. That's on Willow Creek Boulevard and Grissom Parkway, and it's 14 acres. And again, it's at the end of town and it's vacant. So this was just to show you, I mean, this is a request that could impact other regional commercials, but it's not going to impact the town in a negative perspective from the review of the regional commercials that are there. This, as from the map, it will not impact the aesthetics of any major entranceway into the city. And the only aesthetic condition that's even in the city ordinance is that's in an enclosed building. That's the only aesthetic at all that was put in this in 2015. So we're going to show you through the PowerPoint why we're asking for this change. You obviously have no obligation to approve it. This is a discretionary request to you and to City Council, and it's a decision that you'll make based upon whether you think this should be allowed to allow this particular property to expand and potentially others, or if you prefer the vacant Kmart parking lot because it's likely not going to be developed. This change will not do any harm to the city, but will allow a better visual appearance for this particular site. And this does serve residential neighbors, so it does comport with what the staff was saying, even though they seem to say it didn't. So starting with the PowerPoint, this is the existing site. That's the old Kmart. That's secure space. You have the bowling alley to the right, and then to the south of that would be Wachovia. This is about Insight Property Group. They are coast to coast. They've been in business for over 70 years. Over 30 years, and they have 61 sites nationally. They are an integrated company. They build, they manage, they rent, they keep it all together in the one company, Insight Property Group. Mr. Salibi and Nick Kent, they're the ones that are currently working on this site. These are the site conditions before redevelopment, before it was redeveloped in 2019. Again, vacant Kmart, previously Cook's, has that large parking lot in front. And that's what it looks like today. We've talked to people. They think it's a nice appearance. They think they did a good job. They've been good neighbors. And currently, it's 98% at capacity after only a few years of being in business. They are state-of-the-art. They have security. They have keypads. These are a couple of the other ones that they have done. They have roll-up doors. The roll-up doors are quiet. These are actually internal doors. If you have any questions about any of this, Mr. Salebi can talk about it. Again, this has been quickly leased up. They are full occupancy. They did it much quicker than normal because this is a new site. It's conveniently located. Again, it's an underutilized site. Looking at it, you have only about you have a 21% building coverage currently, and it's mostly the northern portion of the property. The market demand, that's why they're here. Their market is demanding more units. And the market is demanding that they have some internal roll-up doors so people can bring their station wagon or the van, take things out of their garage and move them right into it. So that's why, and you'll see what we mean by external doors internal to the site. So the market demand, and this shows the what they've proposed in the past on, to realtors and to people that are interested in potentially purchasing the site. Unfortunately, they've not had any success in marketing this at all. If you can see on the bottom, Insight conducted an exhaustive nationwide marketing program engaging 2 local Titusville commercial brokers, including Holly Carver, and marketing the property to nationwide tenants via CoStar, LoopNet, and it aggregated more than 50 property listing websites, and they were not able to sell the property. Also, again, because they already have 22% lot coverage, they only get another 8%. So again, there's not a whole lot that can be done with that extra 8%. Again, they have a strong market demand. They're turning away 40 customers a month. So this is the proposed design. Again, we talked to others in the community and we had some mural designs, but this is what we were determined because it looks like an office space facing Cheney with enhanced landscaping, pavers, things to make it look like a nice office building. So that's the intent. This is the proposed site plan. I know it's difficult to see. To the left of the screen is the existing building. To the right is what they propose to do. That middle building is building 5. That will be internal and will be air conditioned and accessed internally. You have the 4 buildings on the outside. Those are all facing the main building, building 5, and those are where the roll-up doors will be. And they're quiet roll-up doors. So people can drive in through those side areas that are open, drive right up to the units, unload their car, and then come back out. And that will be a secure site, will be keypadded in. So we also had someone say, well, people will be sleeping in there. Well, no, it's going to be secure. People aren't going to be able to do that. And they're proposing to close it at 7 p.m. at night. But again, if that's a conditional use issue or a condition that should be in this ordinance, operation hours, that's something that we are certainly happy to consider. When we put in the application, we didn't have this proposed site plan. The lot coverage is only about 44%. So at this time, I would like to amend the 60% coverage to a 50% coverage to reduce that maximum that we could do if you're inclined to support this ordinance. So that would be a lot coverage of 50 instead of 60. And it's based upon this design. So again, this is existing on the top to proposed on the bottom. And that's looking from the southeast looking west. And this is coming from the west driving east. And with that, Mr. Celebi is going to talk about some of their other projects and give you a little bit more insight into their company and why they are here today. And then I'll conclude very briefly, and then we can answer any questions you may have.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elias Slavy, as Kim introduced us. I work for Insight Property Group. I handle the East Coast from New York all the way down to Florida. We currently have a project in Miami that we're constructing. This project in particular, the reason why we're here tonight, because we feel, as Kim mentioned, that this use is more closer to commercial than industrial. Most of our customers are residential based. We usually when we look at a property or an asset, we look at the 3-mile radius. That's what we focus on for the most part for demographics. And the second highest use that we usually get in our assets are small businesses. So especially since the COVID, a lot of people shed some of their offices, some of their extension, and they started using self-storage as a supplement. This property, for instance, is in Manhattan on Upper East Side. That was built it's a 0-lot building right adjacent to a school, like a private school. And behind us, again, we didn't put too many pictures here, but just to tell you how we feel that our asset or our product fits in the market, in the very residential market. And there is a tower of 38-story with like several hundred apartments. The next one. This was in industrial area that on a highway that we built. It was a shopping center. Home Depot bought the shopping center. They rezoned it. We end up getting this lot. The reason why they liked our use because as a self-storage, We don't require parking, we don't impact roads, it generates taxes, and we don't impact schools. So that it has very minimum impact on the community. And this one, another one in College Point, Queens, very dense Queens market in New York City as well, 180,000 square feet. We built a 2-level. There is such a high demand that 2 of these assets that I showed so far, we go 2 sellers below grade because over there we don't have the luxury of the land like we have here. And as Kim mentioned, is the most demanded type of product is the product that has access from the outside because it gives people the easiness to get in and get out. It's like the model. I used to work for retail for 10 years, and a lot of people moved away from malls to shopping center, and that's one of the reasons. You want to get in and get out. You don't want to get stuck for like 20 minutes getting in, taking the elevator, going up. So that's why this model is very successful. This is in Livingston, New Jersey, upscale town. We built this with the community. Behind this building, we have like a RV station. It's within a year, it's 85% filled, and the store also is doing great. So everywhere we go, as Kim mentioned, I'm sorry, I keep referencing you, is like we design in-house. We have a design group in-house. We manage our assets. We have a construction company that we build and we maintain it. So we're not here to build it and flip it. We like our asset. That's why this is a very successful store, and we, with your permission and support, hopefully, we can get this and we can work with the conditions if there's a concern on lot coverage or, other aspect. Thank you.
So just in conclusion, to sum up, and I appreciate your time and consideration of this, because again, this is something we're asking. There's nothing you have to do. But this is not a site plan request, but that's what the site plan is intended to look like. That's what they want to build, and you've heard the reasons why they want to build it. Rodney Honeycutt can answer any questions about site plan. This will improve. They will have to upgrade the stormwater, and treat the water, which hasn't been done with much success because this was originally built in 1959. And we ask that you consider the reasons for the code and look at the common sense analysis of 30% coverage really doesn't suffice for this property because there's so much vacant area there. And also, if a 50% lot coverage, they'd be able to do what they'd wanted to do. They don't need the parking. It's a commercial use, not an industrial use. So with that, we're happy to answer questions, happy to entertain any changes. So we'd ask if you consider approval.
Member Charles.
So the exterior door internal to the site is the doors for the cars to go in, or is it, what's the? Because I still didn't.
See
Right.
that the bottom building goes left to right?
Yeah,
That's on the west side. The doors
Yeah.
are facing internal to the site. So it's an external
right.
building.
So, you're talking about the doors to the storage units?
Yes, the roll-up
Because they're
doors.
outside, really,
They're
storage units.
Yes, they're external doors on that building that face internal to the site.
But
So they won't-
so are you saying that those buildings would be air conditioned though still, but they would still have exterior doors?
No, they're just single units.
Right.
They'll 10 by 20, 20 feet deep with a roll-up door. So those will not be air conditioned. The big building in the middle, building 5, would be air conditioned.
Okay.
But the
I mean,
roll-up doors will not be external to the site.
Yeah, I mean, just for everyone's information, my wife and I do have a storage unit there at the place, and I do like it. It's very nice, and I've always thought that that big parking lot is a waste of space. I like how the storage unit, the building looks. I like how it looks. I like how it is inside. It's easy. It's nice and clean, and I've thought that we should have something up there. And as far as I owned a Christmas shop here in town, and we had to close it because retail is dying, and it's mostly online. So I can understand how it's hard to get retail space sold in the area. So, and I've talked to a lot of other people who own retail spaces, and it's tough for them too. And some of them are thinking about moving somewhere else or just going online. And so I know that's tough. So I can definitely understand having a problem finding a buyer for a space out there because it's a dying area. But thanks.
Member Faison.
So you had made a statement that putting something there wouldn't necessarily change the aesthetics. And the first thing that I noticed through one of your photos there is that it won't look the same. And not looking the same is a change in my opinion. So there would be a change to the aesthetics, such as that. The next question that I have is that the language as written states that doors will be internal to site. Now, if this was to go forward, right, and the next person that wanted to build a mini storage with external doors, just putting a door on the building is external to site as it's written, because there's no clarity in it, there's no clarification. So if I were to build a mini storage in the next RC development area, I could put a door and it will be external to site, because that's how I read it. All right. Okay. So I have a problem with the language there in reading internal to site, because as it stands right now, mini storage is supposed to have one entrance internal, and storage units are going to be into the building. So if I read that there and I was going to any other RC place, I would say, hey, I could have roll-up doors. So I don't like the language there. That site, I understand that that's a large parcel of just empty space, and something needs to be there. And I was really looking to something else other than additional storage. I get it. We need it. It's a great business model. It's a fantastic business model, and it's generating a lot of revenue. And so for that, I mean, that's awesome. I'd want to put one there too. But unfortunately, I don't know. The language is written. I don't like the way the language is written. I'd have to look at that some more. And as well as going back to, again, as written now, 60%. And even if we were to go back and say, okay, well, let's go at 50%. I think 50% is a good number. Again, when I look at the next location of RC, right, the next person that goes to build one, I don't know. And when we look at now amending the language of what a mini storage unit is, and I get that you believe that this is RC, right? And that's our feelings. But unfortunately, the language to amend it to say that it's industrial use, it's still industrial use, no matter how much we feel that we think it's RC, and no matter how nice the buildings look, it's still an industrial use item. And so until the language gets amended to read otherwise, it is what it is. I don't know how you guys feel, but that's how I feel about it.
What language are you referencing that says mini warehouses is an industrial use?
So here we have, so the city of Titusville has gone ahead and defined what a mini warehouse is and its uses, right, in here. And so one of the things that we're looking to do, for example, access to, let's just use the first bullet, for example, paragraph A. It says, access to each storage unit shall be from within an enclosed air-conditioned building, all right? So we're looking to amend that to state, my glasses, excuse me, or from an exterior door internal to the site, right? From an exterior door internal to the site. So for me, my site is the perimeter of the site, right? And an exterior door is a door that's on it. So every exterior door to me is internal to the site. The way that I read that, every external door is interior to the site. Do y'all get what I'm saying? So if you put a fence around this building and you put a door on this building, every door is still internal to the site. Does it make sense to you? Because it makes sense to me. Because again, we're talking about the language as written and as it reads. It can be ambiguous.
I understand, internal to the site. It should be facing internal to the site.
Or however we want to state it, right? But when I read this, right, it looks like kind of again, I look again for the future, okay, and someone else that goes to build not your site, but the next RC site. And the language that we leave here today either permits or denies the next person this opportunity. And so I think the city of Titusville did a great job when they put mini storage units that are allowed in RC to only be internal units. And so I agree with that. I don't think that we should allow that language as written, the proposed language, inside our RC in this city. Whatever somebody does someplace else, great for them, but I live here in the great, wonderful city of Titusville.
And again, I don't understand, you said that it's an industrial use by definition. I didn't know where you were getting that.
So what I'm saying is that currently, right now, right, external doors,
No, I get that, but you had said it's an industrial use, and you said by definition, and I didn't know where you were getting that.
So earlier you said you said your opinion, you said my opinion, storage units are RC, commercial, right? And I tend to disagree. I say that they're industrial. So we just disagree on that.
Okay, I thought you said there was a definition in the code I had missed.
Oh, no, I haven't gotten there. I'm just using our feelings on the topic, that's all.
And by aesthetics, I mean better looking, so I misspoke. But to me, that looks better than a vacant lot. So I do want to clarify that.
I know what you meant, but my whole point is again, I liked the original photo that you put up there that showed potential other
So did my client, but it didn't happen.
yeah. So anyways, I apologize, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Member Garad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several questions. I'll start with staff for the first part of my question. The discussion by the applicant is that there's not a lot of property available currently to promote development of this type of use. Only a few parcels are available. The city has recently done some annexations along South Street 405, I guess it is. And so in terms of expanding the city limits, including new properties, would it be fair to say there is available land that could be developed through the annexation process in which land use and zoning that would be compatible with this type of use proposed by the applicant or existing as the example given the quote Cooks? It was 1969, by the way, for the record. I helped build the building. I just kind of found that curious. I was alive then. While looking at myself in the mirror up there, I don't think that's necessarily true. The point I'm having is that the city will grow. Annexation is potential. There is available industrial land uses that are in the unincorporated county that are capable of being annexed, if not surely will be annexed, because the urban standards for that development is water and sewer, and the city is going to require you to annex if you're going to get those services. So using the logic that you don't have a lot of available property to provide a service that's in high demand is represented by occupancy and quickly occupied, and furthermore to expand. That being said, there is quite likely exactly that available, but you'd have to go through a process different than this one. Second question, and I'll let you answer them each after I'm done. The second question I have for staff is it fair to say that this warehouse that was redeveloped from the Cooks became Kmart site is consistent with the current standard of 30% building coverage and the external door entrance and conditioned floor area? That building represents conformity with those standards? The history you said about how it came about from zoning text amendments, land development code amendments. Those are the two questions for staff.
So to answer the first part of your question, I heard from the applicant that there aren't enough properties, or very few properties that are zoned RC that are available to utilize this new ordinance. Not that there are not enough properties in general available to build mini warehouse. That's what I heard. The other part, to answer your other part of your question about annexations, yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunities for annexing surrounding properties of the city that could be utilized for a variety of uses, including commercial or industrial or mini warehouses. This property that's in question here off of Cheney Highway is the only one that we have that utilized the ordinance that was adopted in 2015. So it had an existing building, and they converted the existing building into an indoor enclosed air-conditioned building, consistent with the conditions that were adopted without ordinance in 2015. As far as whether it meets all the other criteria, I'd have to look to see the site plan, how all that was done. But in order to allow that use, it would have had to meet the criteria that was there in place.
And that's a fair conclusion. I would conclude the same. In terms of my point, wasn't the RC, this is a zoning text amendment. So first and foremost, it's my opinion that when you do a zoning text amendment, it's not focused on a property, it's not focused on a promissory note of this picture or that PowerPoint, all due respect. It's anywhere in the city or future land that becomes annexed into the city. So what you do today is undone unless you amend that text again. And all the pictures and all the conditional use potentials and all that sundry additional language to support your building on your lot, on that site, for your economic reasons, are only for that site, and this is for everywhere in the city. So I have a real difficulty seeing the presentation and feeling warm and comfortable about the development of future sites through existing zoning or the expansion of the city limits through annexations that occur when you only have a simple rule proposed. 60% building coverage and open doors. The next questions go to the applicant. And if you could help me understand, you showed in your PowerPoint a photographic representation from aerial view of buildings. The chairman mentioned that there was one day a thought we would have a Chick-fil-A. I don't think you have the population to have that yet, but that's another question. The picture you showed this out parcel development potential. You showed another picture, an illustration, an aerial view where you showed what you believe you would propose following, and to be consistent with your text amendment, these buildings would be shaped or facing this direction and they would be aesthetically pleasing and all that. Only if you had the expansion of the 60%. You can't do that with the remaining. You said you had 21% building coverage and that would leave you with about 9%, or was it 22%?
That's 22% currently, and the site plan is shown, says 44%. I was going to put it back up. But it has been engineered, so that's why they were comfortable with 50%. When we asked for the 60%, it hadn't even been completely drawn yet.
I don't think that was my question. My question goes back to your presentation.
Yes.
In the presentation, you showed a rendering
Yes.
of what that site would have looked like as you marketed it for out parcel development, but you had no takers.
Correct.
That was the summary of what I got.
Correct. And that wasn't engineered either. Those were just, yeah.
I'm good with that. That's what renderings are
Right.
for. It's to show a conceptual plan. So the point being, if that would be consistent with the site conforming to the current standard, the 30%, that remaining 7% yields you a development potential on those out parcel sites, and you showed the rendering of that.
Right, that was just, that wasn't scale. You could only put, I think, a 16,000 square foot building with
But
the
you
8%
could
coverage.
put some building in that 7% remainder, correct?
Yes, if someone would buy it, yes.
Okay. And so when someone, and that's another part question, I appreciate the buy and sell thing, but then again, the market equilibrium you're looking for apparently wasn't achieved. If, I don't want to sound facetious whatsoever, but if you were giving the land away, I am sure there would be a 16,000 square foot building on an out parcel in front of your warehouse. Because no one would give land away. There has to be some degree of balance to that. And that's what this market equilibrium concept was for. It apparently isn't there today. It could be there someday. It may be there someday. But to change the zoning text because the market equilibrium yesterday or last month or a year ago or 2019 hasn't been found seems kind of a rash way of doing it, to change the entire city's matrix for development because that site didn't find a market equilibrium point doesn't fly too well with me in my experience. So I think what I saw you present would be a last question for the staff. Is planned development a zoning district that could be provided for that would promote this use?
That is possible, that it could be a tool.
And would a planned development zoning district where your artist renderings and agreements and consents and architectural restrictions and pretty pictures could be implemented based on their agreement to develop the land according to that planned development district? So these pictures could be implemented as that's what it'll look like, just the way they presented it through a planned development zoning district as opposed to a straight zoning district where the only criteria is 60% building coverage and opening the doors to the outside.
That is a possible option.
And that is really critical to what I think the applicant's presentation, and I say that's very respectfully, it all sounds so good for the presentation of your site, but it all sounds so bad applied overall to all sites where there's very little restrictions. It would certainly then seem to me that if you wanted to negotiate a development where the city's happy with the way the building looks today, and it's highly occupied, I think it's a lovely building, it's a lot better than Cook's look by far. I was on the floor doing chalk lines at point, but the point would be, did you consider approaching staff to seek a different zoning district consistent with the comprehensive plan where your presentation could become the record and that is what would be built as opposed to just two limiting factors, 60% building and doors open outward?
Yeah, and no, and we didn't. We did discuss what we were looking at. I don't know your plan development regulations that well, but usually 5.5 acres isn't large enough, so I don't know what your requirements are. But also too, again, the whole reason for the map and the regional commercial is that there's only 8 parcels other that this could impact. And so if there's more restrictions that are needed or a conditional use that are needed, yes, we're changing the code, but that's how we got in the first place in 2015. That's how you're getting an assisted living facility at the Titusville Mall. So codes change based upon consumer demands and consumer desires and the citizens' desires. So that's what we heard today. That's, perspective, but again, there's only 9 properties. And if land's coming in to be annexed, then they can say, no, we're not going to make it RC because it might be more storage.
Well, that was critical to my question.
Right.
You didn't explore a potential alternative whereby, from your presentation, which I respect, you've shown me it's going to be lovely, but there's no guarantee to that. The response to that is we can do conditional uses and we can lather up a whole lot of standards, but we're doing it in a difficult manner where we're adding arbitrary things to the record as opposed to going through a zoning district where the negotiated agreement is this is what we'll build the way this looks. And if we do this, we will end up with a nice project. And more importantly, we won't end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater citywide or for the next 100 years as the city grows with sites that only have a very limited standard by which they develop. So I would simply ask you again the question, you might perhaps want to work more closely with staff to see if there's an alternative to
Agreed.
just what you've got in front of us.
Yes, sir. Thank
Okay,
you. We'll do
we've
that.
got a lot of lights lit up here, and we're still under discussion. Citizens to be, do we have many cards?
I only have the 2 speaking cards that have spoken.
Okay. Member Grant.
Ma'am, could you put the proposed site plan back up again,
Maybe.
please?
No, I just didn't know how to turn it on.
Yeah, this one here. Building number 5 is in the middle, am I correct? Surrounded by 4 additional buildings, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, the one that's next to Cheney Highway, we're looking, the rear of that building is towards Cheney Highway, am I correct?
That's the one that would have the facade that looks like an office with the doors coming, it's facing north.
Okay, I was wondering what, I was
Right.
strictly thinking about aesthetics here, and what it would look like towards Cheney Highway when you're riding down
Right.
Cheney Highway, okay.
Facing
So
south,
the
isn't it?
other picture that you showed, this one here,
That's-
this is the way it would look towards
Yes, that would be,
Cheney?
that's Cheney Highway. You're looking at Cheney Highway. You're
How tall
looking.
is the building? Do you know?
It's 1 story.
All of them?
Yes, all of these are 1 story in the front.
Also?
And it's 2 story in the back, but existing is 2 story. All the new would be 1 story.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Member Rogers.
I'm impressed with their architecture, I have to say. I've never seen storage buildings built like that. They're sharp. I'm impressed with the solution and the 1-story thing. And I get that they have been hampered and hamstrung by this requirement. This is going to probably sound like a stupid question, but so if I got this right, that they, because of the type of business this is, that they only have 30% of footprint on that property. So they only have another 8% of the property that can be built on by them or by anybody, including if they sell part of the property to another person? Or does that reset if it's, I mean, I was.
It's by anybody, and it's because the regional commercial has a limitation of 30% coverage for any use.
Okay. So,
But so-
so who, even if they sold like the front half of the parking lot to somebody else, they could still only use the remaining 8%?
Correct.
I find that exceptionally restrictive. I mean, I guess that's how it is, but I'm a little shocked by that. But I guess the only other thing I wanted to say was I don't think, this was a much better request than I expected. Now that I understand it, I do think that the language needs to be reworded. I think Mr. Faison is correct on that. I too was a little confused by the way that would work, or at least maybe I thought it would leave, an opening through which one could drive a truck later. But I guess the one thing is I do think that it's important to consider, yes, okay, retail may be dead or dying. I'm not sure that's going to be a permanent condition, but maybe it is. But it does take, on the one hand, it does take a huge chunk of possible retail space off the table in an area that really could stand it. On the other hand, if there's only 8% of the land left for retail space anyway, like what are we going to do with it? So I don't know. I have to say, if I were reviewing an architecture student's solution for a problem of this sort, I would give this high marks.
Member Moscoso.
Yeah, I think you mentioned citizens' desires, and that is one thing. As I've been talking to people, I have yet to hear someone say, we need more storage units. And I really haven't heard anyone say, we need more storage units in front of another storage unit. What I hear people say is we need more places to eat and we need more places to shop. And I understand that you haven't been able to sell this property since 2019. Yeah, I think it'd be a big disservice to our community if we just let this go because it's a quote unquote eyesore. Let's just go ahead and stick more storage units. I think we can do better for our citizens of Titusville. So those are my thoughts on it.
Vice Chairman Aton.
So for Brad, I guess, or Eddie, when we did the original conversion of the Kmart building to what it is now, is the land coverage 30% based on that use? That's a zoning land use. It's not the CUP or whatever is approved or however it's from a managed storage standpoint.
It's a development standard within that zoning district for all developments cumulatively on that lot.
So, I know that, and remember the presentation where I think it was actually 2 out parcels that the goal was to turn the parking lot into 2 quick service restaurants. And I certainly sympathize with the fact that if it is an 8,000 foot or two 8,000 square foot limitations because of what's left based on the 30%, that part's not desirable. As far as the use of taking that, up another 20% for what's proposed as more storage, I don't necessarily agree with that. And I don't know what the method to give them some relief to make the out parcels for the purposes that I think we desired, which was the, quick service restaurants or some kind of offices or something that's more compatible with the kinds of things that have gone in recently along that corridor. I would be open to that. Certainly open to getting rid of a bunch of blacktop and trying to get more permeable surfaces, more trees, more along there instead of a sea of blacktop that it is now. But I don't quite know what the mechanism for that is, but I like the idea of Member Garrard on the PUD, if that's the method and if that works or something. But certainly I do have a lot of problems with the fact that to get this to where it's of some use besides what it is, we have to change an ordinance that applies across the entire city.
Absolutely.
Is very problematic to me.
Okay, any other cards, Lori?
No, sir.
Okay. I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Any questions or?
No. As we've all said, my issue, again, is again, across the board, blanketing, making changes for something that they can do through another avenue that's available to them. I like to think that they're very, very intelligent people. They know this. I don't know why the option of changing the ordinance was the one that they landed on, but it doesn't give me a warm and fuzzy that this is the option that they chose. They're very intelligent. They know their options. So, yeah, that's where I stand.
Any other discussion? Well, in regard to what Member Childs said, I'll have to disclose too that I did not pay for a unit in that, but I had a family member that had a unit there. And I would admit they're very nice units and they're well taken care of. But that doesn't go along with the RC zoning. Any other discussion? Member Childs?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I like it, but I totally understand not wanting. I didn't exactly like all of the plan, but I like to have something filled in there for sure. So, what Member Garrard said about a plan development zone, or is that what it's called, plan development zone? I think going down that route, and then if it's something that can be reviewed and it's an overall plan, I think that's a great idea. If it's possible, if it's in our code right now that they can go down that path, I think that's a great option to go down. So then everyone can look at it and say, yeah, that looks great. And that even if it's not storage, if it's something else or whatever it is, we can look at it. But just something so it can be changed to something else besides a sea of asphalt. It does look a little, there's sometimes trucks are parked there. Even if there's events or something, I'd love to have an event there if it's all like lay down some grass or something. But anyway, all right.
Member Rogers.
I just wondered, Brad, this 30%, you said there were some that were more restricted, 25%. Have you found, this 30% applies to anything in this zoning type? The 30, or is it simply businesses of this type? I mean, the 30%.
The 30% building coverage is for all buildings cumulatively on the lot.
Okay.
So that's the maximum.
In this
regardless of
particular zoning?
I'm sorry?
In this particular type of zoning?
In this zoning district. So each zoning district has its own standard.
Okay.
I believe the community commercial has the same. I did mention earlier that the neighborhood commercial and the office perfect.
Something happened to your microphone.
Did you not hear?
I did hear.
Okay.
Yeah. So have you? I mean, part of that, I suppose, is to allow for parking, and part of it is to allow for I don't know, a drainage pond or something. Yeah, I think something was going on with my microphone. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, have you found that to be overly restrictive, or in other situations besides this particular property, has that ratio seemed to work out fairly well, and are there pretty good reasons for that? I assume that there are. I just wonder what they are.
I can't speak for the specific reasons why that was put in there at the time when these regulations were adopted. My conclusion would be to address what was presented earlier, primarily it's a regulation to ensure that there's compatibility of scale of buildings with other uses nearby, because commercial zoning districts are typically something you find next to residential. The out or the exception to Mr. Aton's question about what is the relief, currently the relief is a variance. So, and that's true of any other regulations inside the zoning districts. If you need to get a relief to the minimum criteria for, or standard for a setback, or the maximum building coverage, or whatever that might be, the variance before the Board of Adjustments and Appeals is the option.
A one-time thing for that particular property?
Those types of requests are processed in relation to a particular application for development.
Okay.
So when we receive an application for a site plan development, for a site plan for a proposed development or a building permit, during that review, we determine whether they are meeting the criteria, and if they're not, we tell them what the options are, and typically it's a variance.
Okay, thanks.
Member Garrard.
And same question line, when I asked earlier and the applicant apparently, and some of the members followed the idea, you responded, Brad, that a planned development, I say that because I'm familiar with that terminology in the city, it may be called planned unit development or whatever. That is a alternative that would allow the applicant to present what they've presented as an example tonight in a way in which the commission and city council could actually be confident that what's proposed is what gets built that way. Then that zoning district is available for rezoning potentially.
Yes.
Okay. And when you spoke about that the alternative that would be more consistent than to change the zoning text could be a variance is predicated on a hardship. If you have an alternative zoning district where you haven't explored that particular alternative, it would seem far-fetched to me that a variance could be granted contingent on showing an illustration of hardship when you haven't tried the route that's available to you. And that's very important to me, that relationship between potentially a variance application as opposed to a zoning text application, as opposed to a zoning district request of change. Three different avenues.
So if this ordinance is adopted with any particular conditions, if the conditions are part of the use, that's typically not something you can consider as a variance, because that you have to meet those conditions in order to allow that use. But if there are other standards, such as in the zoning district itself, such as additional regulations related to setbacks, placement of building, access management, height, bulk standards of that nature, those are typically things that can be relieved through the variance process with an actual bona fide development going through the process. So if this ordinance is adopted, the next step would be that someone would want to utilize this ordinance with an actual proposed site plan. And through that process would determine what relief they would need to go through depending on what that standard they can't meet is being presented to us. But yes, they can. It does appear that the planned development zoning tool that we have in the city's code could be used. I'd have to review more, or the applicant will have to speak with us to see what they want to do and to explore that option. To answer specifics as to whether it's something they could use tonight,
No.
Yeah, okay.
My comments are not for this application. This is a zoning text amendment, as I refer to it, plain and simple. Pretty pictures are just that. Technically, they're inapplicable to anywhere else in the city. There is an alternative in which the pretty pictures, as I like to refer to them, could be incorporated into a presentation in which, when the Planning and Zoning Commission and subsequently the council would review what it is being proposed, it would attach itself to that development order that's issued. It would look that way, or it would be shaped that way. Going the route we're on now, the alternative to changing the zoning district to get an agreeable bond between the applicant and the city council for approval of the pretty picture, would be doing a zoning text amendment. On face value right now, there's nothing except enlarging the building footprint, and I believe you said bulk. So if they can't build 60% building on that site zoned RC today, an alternative route the applicant could seek would be to argue they have a hardship and seek a variance from that bulk restriction of 30% and say, I need it to be 60 because I have a hardship. And my comment was, I can't see a hardship existing when staff has reported you have an alternative route you should explore, which would be doing a zoning change for one that would be a contractual relationship between the presentation in the future development of the site. That is available for them to choose to look at. You said that is a zoning district that's potentially compatible with the comp plan on that site.
Yes, provided everything is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and other regulations, the plan development rezoning process is a potential tool. It's a tool to tailor make a zoning district, basically.
Thank you. And I think that's what was being presented tonight, a tailor-made plan. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Anyone care to make a motion? Member Garad.
I hate to be on a roll, but I am. I've stated on the record my position and my opinion, and the basis of that, it would be my recommendation to recommend denial to the city council of the applicant's request to change the zoning.
The motion is to recommend denial,
Yes.
I'll second.
seconded by Member Moscoso. Any other discussion? Roll call, please. Lori?
Member Faison?
Yes.
Member Moscoso?
Yes.
Member Garad?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Secretary Grant?
No.
Chairman Richardson?
Yes. Okay,
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
thank you for coming, and it'll be heard at council meeting.
The public hearing will be June 11th.
June 11th. Okay, next item is item 9D, Golden Knights Boulevard Ordinance.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, Commissioners. This item should look familiar. We've discussed it at a couple meetings now. Just a refresher, at the last time we discussed this item, it was the April 3rd P&Z meeting, and that's when we got some feedback from the commission on what you'd like to see in an ordinance. And just to summarize, again, those are on the bottom of page 148. There's 3 bullet points. You all suggested that you would request a berm with a continuous hedge along the berm slope and an opaque fence or wall along the top of the berm. Second point was to allow flexibility to build a berm wall where the berm is facing Golden Knights Boulevard and the wall faces interior to the site. And then the third request was to apply the enhanced buffer to all development along Golden Knights Boulevard, not just those uses that include outdoor storage. So I believe we've captured all those points. The first change is shown on page 151 of 172 tonight, and that's establishing the building setback. Again, that was part of the original draft where we had a 50-foot building setback from Golden Knights Boulevard on these properties. So you'll see that in the M2 zoning district standards. On the next page, page 152, the bottom of the box, there's a new footnote being proposed, and that's to establish the landscape buffer. So you'll see if you follow in this table where it says proposed development on the left-hand side for commercial or industrial developments that abut a public right-of-way, there's a type B buffer that's required, and then there's a superscript 3 to indicate that if the property's along not just any public right-of-way, but the Golden Knights Boulevard right-of-way, that the 50-foot landscape yard would apply in that case. And then we included illustrations to help understand what the berm should look like and what the berm wall could look like. And those are on page 155. So you see in Exhibit A, it's the first illustration on the top. You have a 5-foot tall berm and a 6-foot wall on top of the berm. And then the berm wall, very similar, but would save space by only having a half berm. So this is the ordinance, I think, captures the items that you requested, and if not, we'll happily make some additional changes.
Eddie, pardon me, but I did not give Secretary Grant an opportunity to state a reason why he voted no on that last item.
It's too late now.
No, you can still state.
It's not important anymore.
Chelsea,
I just,
go ahead.
no, I'm just tired of seeing the ugly parking lot. And it seems to me that any type of construction was better than none. That's all.
Okay. Now, go ahead.
That was the end of my presentation. so happy to answer any questions. The text that goes along with those illustrations is on page 154, just before it, and that's a new subsection H that we're proposing that writes out those requirements.
And this was shown before the airport authority, right?
The airport authority has seen it, and they concurred with the suggestions that P&Z had, and so they're okay with this ordinance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Member Rogers.
I just had a question. I really kind of, in all the visuals we've seen, I love the trees. And is there any requirement or even just suggestion to use trees, or is that just up to each individual property owner? As opposed, I'm thinking a hedge is mentioned, but.
Right, so the continuous hedge is the enhancement above what would be required. Otherwise, the typical landscape buffer plantings, which includes trees, would be required along the berm.
Member Aton.
I'm not sure I understood what you said. So if the property's developed and it's an office building and they have a nice facade and everything, is this still required because it's abutting Golden Knights Boulevard? Yes. Or, so no matter what, it's effectively, it's gotta go behind the berm wall?
So you mentioned that if the site was already developed?
No. If they're, so, you know, this was initiated, to my recollection, because of the concrete crushing facility and all that, which 100% get this is required for that. But if a piece of property along there, Blue Origin, SpaceX, somebody wants to put a nice looking office building on a piece of property that abuts Golden Knights Boulevard, does this still have to go in front of their building?
Yes, sir.
Member Findler, I saw your light on for a moment.
Yeah, I had a question. So this is only for Golden Knights Boulevard. It wouldn't affect perimeter road around the airport, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And just to add on that, that was because of the direction given by City Council to focus on the entrance to the airport, which is Golden Knights Boulevard.
Member Rogers.
Could we do this for every street in Titusville? I think it'd be.
Member Gride.
You raised a question I didn't think about on that. When we discussed this previously and the history that was provided about the concrete crushing, in the discussions, I believe that I was trying to emphasize the buffering as to impede the view of outdoor storage areas inclusive of concrete storage. And the whole upshot of that was if it's ugly, hide it behind a wall and a berm. But with the response that this would apply to any development, including SpaceX, which I think is a lovely big building along a road similar to Golden Knights Boulevard, that, in my opinion, wasn't what I was trying to accomplish with my discussion. I was hoping we would take the ugly stuff and put it behind a berm, but if you had a proposal, using SpaceX as the example, that wouldn't necessarily be the standard by which you had to develop that site. Is there a way that flexibility can be put in there?
So I remember that being part of the discussion. So going back to the bullet points, summarizing the points that we received on April 3rd, there was discussion about a berm not being continuous along Golden Knights and that not being ideal. And so if you had a concrete crushing facility, a professional office building, and then another concrete crushing facility, the feedback that we received was that P&Z would like to see a continuous berm regardless of the uses. But if you wanted to specify that only applies to where there's outdoor storage, you could do that, but that wasn't the direction I understood.
Certainly, I can understand. I'd be interested what the other members feel like, whether it should be a categorical application or whether it would be only applied to those which are unsightly, like outdoor storage.
Member Rogers.
I just think if you don't make it, apply to everybody, then you get into beauty contests. You got to have somebody judging which building's ugly and which building's not, and there are fist fights and people cry. I think, frankly, it ought to apply to everything. I mean, the idea was that it was the kind of gateway to the city, in and out, via air, and I don't know. I got more faith in the ability of a berm to make something look better than the ability of a builder.
Member Grant.
Actually, it's the gateway to our, as I said before, the gateway to our airport. That's one of the reasons why I thought that it would be better if it was uniform throughout the entire length of Golden Knights Boulevard. That's just my opinion, though.
Vice Chairman Aton.
So, on that note, are there guidelines on entrances, penetrations through the berm? Because aren't we blocking, some of these properties, I assume, have no alternate access to a road besides off of Golden Knights Boulevard. So, has to be a penetration. What does that penetration look like? What does signage look like? Are we somebody gonna try to sell a piece of property to put an office building on, but they can't put signage because there's a berm there? I'm just worried that there's some unintended consequences to this.
Okay, at this point, I'll open the public hearing. Laura, do you have any cards?
No cards.
Okay, close the public hearing. Comes now back to the commission.
Yeah.
Member Childs?
Do you have to like make the driveway go like this? So then they or maybe up over the berm? I don't know.
Like
I think we
Serpentine Drive into Lowe's?
I think we talked about that a little bit during our discussion, but there's so many things that you have to take into consideration. It's really tough to like nail them all down. So I don't know. I don't know that we didn't talk about a screening or anything. I think we were like, well, they're going to go in and there's going to be an opening through the burn. And I could go either way on if they have to. I understand having a nice building there and that you wouldn't need a wall there to hide a nice looking building. And we really want to cover up the uses like, the outdoor storage and concrete crushing stuff or whatever that doesn't look nice. But I could go either way on there. But I understand maybe you have to, I don't know what the answer to that is unless it's like going around having the curve and the street or something. But and it's like offset or something. The wall's offset. And so you have to go around. But I don't know what that looks like. But or it has to be on a certain part of the property where there isn't outdoor storage or something. So, but I don't know.
Member Findler?
So, yeah, I guess, no, just to really hone in on that question, would this allow for an entrance or would it not?
Yeah, I wanted to expand on that. So an access point would still be allowed through the berm, and so that would impact the visibility. However, a driveway might be 30 feet as opposed to just the concrete crushing facility, as an example, that frontage is 630 feet. So an access point 30 feet compared to not requiring it along an entire frontage of a piece of property because of its use is a big difference.
Member Garad?
One last question for the staff. When the presentation first was, you calculated the vacant development sites potential that this rule would apply to, and I seem to recall there were 2 vacant sites, this being wherever the concrete crushing site would have been, that was one of the 2. And that retroactively, this berm development would only occur if someone were to have to, I guess, completely redevelop the site, or would the city, I don't think that would be too likely, retroactively require implementation of that standard on existing sites.
Right, so I think we talked about the site plan for the concrete crushing facility being expired at one of the previous meetings. So if they were to reapply, they'd have to meet any new standards. There are only a handful of properties along Golden Knights Boulevard. Some of them are not even in the city limits, and so that was another issue that was brought up. But yes, this would only apply to less than 5 properties currently. Thank you.
So if they reapplied and we adopted this ordinance, and council adopted this ordinance, they would have to comply with this ordinance.
Correct.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Sorry. I just want to be clear. So because there's only 2 properties, I think the mental picture we paint is turn into the airport and we've got this nice tree-lined street and the berm and everything like that. But the reality of what could happen is only until it's developed are you going to get it, and it's only on that piece of property. Any other piece of property, they're not required to go back and retroactively add it. So it's going to be a hodgepodge of continuity along there. kind of no matter what, right?
Right, so the city's not going to require, a certain date that all the property owners along Golden Knights Boulevard construct a berm along these properties. And a lot of times that's what we do in zoning is gradual changes so that over time we create that continuous berm. So you're right, at first it will be mix and match.
Any other discussion? Any other questions? Anyone care to make a motion? I see everybody jumping at the bit. Member Grant, or Secretary Grant.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to approve the ordinance for Golden Knights Boulevard. I'm not sure if I did that right. With the enhanced buffering along Golden Knights Boulevard.
Okay, motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Member Childs. Any discussion?
One more time.
Vice Chairman Aton?
Is there a mechanism that would allow a person that's building a building? Because again, going back to the office building, I think we're potentially discouraging people of building a nice complex along there if they've got to hide it behind a berm wall. Is there a mechanism we could put into this that would allow them to come back before us or council or the building department, somebody to give relief if it met a certain criteria? And I realize Member Rogers then were, figuring out, is it a good-looking building or not a good-looking building or whatever, but at some point, is there a way to put something in this that would allow, or does it already exist? If we approve this, can they petition, it's not really a variance, but some relief for this if they are presenting a plan and an opportunity for the city to, build something that's even more attractive than the berm would be?
My initial reaction was the variance option, but a hardship might be difficult to prove just because of the use or the aesthetics of the building that's being proposed, so that could be challenging. I'm sure there's a way to write the language to make it so that there's either a conditional use is required. It would be challenging, but if that's the direction that P&Z would like to see, then we could figure it out.
Secretary Grant.
Oh, sorry.
Any other discussion?
When voting, what are our options? So there's yay, nay, is there a third option?
I don't know of one.
Table or modify.
Say again?
You could approve, table, modify.
No, I mean, no, my personal vote. Each of our personal votes, we can say,
No.
because that's the word I'm looking for. Can we abstain?
Only if you have a financial conflict or something that would inure to a financial benefit or loss to you.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Okay, any further discussion? Roll call, please, Lori.
Member Moscoso?
Yes.
Member Garrard? Yes. Secretary Grant?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Member Faison?
No.
Vice Chairman Aton?
No.
Chairman Richardson?
Yes. Okay. Member Faison and Member Aton, you could give your reasons for casting no votes.
Mine is purely the nature of my 4, 5, 6 questions, whatever, is that I would fully support it if there was some mechanism that, because I'm also on the development zone board, somebody brings in a project for a piece of property along there that's very compatible with the airport and a big asset to the city, they're not going to want to build a pretty building behind a berm wall. And it seems like there should be a way to allow them to do that.
Member Faison.
Along those lines, it's the continuity as well. Since the city of Titusville it's not within city limits. of that entire parcel. So even if we wanted to make this a mandate, there'll be patches along the way. And so that mixed with the beautiful building being built, although I totally agree with anything that's going to be of an eyesore, it needs to be behind something. And so just the continuity of implementation is just not there. And so the answer is no.
The vote was 5-2. When will this be heard before city council? Next week?
June 11th.
June 11th. Couple of weeks away. Okay, next item is 9E, street naming resolution for the Riverwalk project.
We have an interlocal agreement with Brevard County 911 to assign addresses. They have a request from the property owner for certain names on the streets that are located inside the Riverwalk apartment development. And so, according to our code and the requirements of the interlocal agreement and Brevard 911, this resolution is being presented for approval in order to formally recognize the proposed street names of that development, and then to address them.
Okay, any questions of the staff? Yes.
How did the county come up with these? Did they like ask people or developers what names they wanted, or how did the county?
The applicant proposes them, and then the Brevard 911, in conjunction with city staff, just to make sure they meet the criteria of our code and they're not creating duplicate names.
Cool.
Any other questions of the staff? Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone to speak on the public hearing? Any cards?
No cards.
Close the public hearing. Comes back before the commission.
I'll make a motion if you're ready. A motion that we recommend approval of 9E street naming resolution for Riverwalk project.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Second by Vice Chairman Aton. Any further discussion? You'll have to pardon me, my nose is getting stopped up. Okay. Call the question and roll call, please. Lori?
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Terry Grant,
Yes.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Member Childs.
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Okay. When will that item be heard before city council?
May 28th.
Okay. Item 9F. Do we have to take any action tonight on 9F?
Sir, this is just for information only and just to ask for your input. Actually, I was going to ask and suggest that if there is a lengthy discussion or a lot of questions, I can certainly offer to have a special workshop with you right before one of your regular meetings, just so we can talk about this more in depth.
I know Member Rogers had some questions.
Hours worth. No, not really. I really just had one kind of big question, Brad. It seemed like as I was going through this, I kept on finding stuff. I thought, why was that taken out? I really like that, and then I discovered, that it actually had just been moved to a different location. So there was really there wasn't a whole lot that just like wholesale disappeared, it seemed to me. It just kind of got shuffled around. But what it did seem to me was that many things that were originally policy were now listed as strategy. And what I wanted to know was, is there any difference in strength between something listed as policy and something listed as strategy? Because it seemed to me that maybe policy was kind of like a little bit of a harder rule and strategy was maybe a little more of a suggestion or a kind of a helpful hint. Am I right about that, or?
That's a good question. So, yeah, the policy is the policy of this is what we want to do. How do we do it is the strategy. Right. And so it's a recommendation of how to go forward to implement that policy.
Okay.
So when the consultant suggested this, they believed that this was a better organization to help implement some of the. So they felt like some of the policies that are now strategies were better written as strategies to implement a much larger goal or a larger policy direction.
And I don't totally disagree with that, and especially in certain situations. I mean, I'd have to go on a case-by-case basis, which I'm not going to do right now. But I guess I just, call me cynical, but I was a little worried that maybe there might have been some kind of a motivation in a few cases to change something from a policy to a strategy and make it a little less strong. And I just, that was the only thing that very occasionally worried me.
No, that's not the case.
Member Moscoso.
Yeah, so I went through a lot of these properties to see who actually owned them, and it looks like a lot of the properties are owned by the housing authority. Is that correct? And then there was a few properties by North Brevard Charities, and then there was only one that wasn't developed, and I think it was APA. I'm not sure who owned that one. But as we look at rezoning to urban mixed use, I know that that would allow for commercial and even, I'm assuming the housing authority is going to possibly want to build more housing, multifamily developments and things like that. If that comes in, how do you rectify that with the roads being local roads? I know that I went to one of those meetings and one of the citizens said, hey, this Tropic Street's a local road. If they're going to put multifamily, how are we going to rectify that? And so maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, so this area, primarily, I think there's a map in your agenda we can point to, page 170 of your packet. So the subject area or study area for these proposed changes to policies is illustrated on that page 170, and you'll see in the red boundary, that's what we're talking about. So most of that area has an urban mixed use land use category, and then there's an underlying zoning district to allow that to help implement those policies, or also called urban mixed use. Most of those areas, most of those streets are all considered to be, are considered to be local roads according to the city's code. I believe Park Avenue, De Leon are considered to be collector roads inside, per our city's code. So right now, inside that zoning district, it does allow a variety of retail uses in different areas mixed in with other residential uses along these roads, along these local roads within that area. So the zoning district, the land use category and the zoning district are looked at to see if they're compatible with that particular area. They're designed for this area or areas like this. And so then you use the underlying zoning district to help implement those policies. So it currently is there. So the zoning district, they can utilize that zoning district to permit certain types of uses that are permitted now on some of these roads, depending on what the criteria is.
I felt like you said something specifically in that meeting about Tropic Street, like FDOT reclassifying that road.
Yeah, so several years ago, FDOT went through an exercise of coming up with context classifications. And it's another methodology of how, it's a very unique methodology of how they classify segments of roads that they own and they maintain throughout the state. And so each district is going through that process right now. And they just recently did that with the city of Titusville. I can share that with you, the latest iteration of that. They look at the context of the segment of the road and make a determination as to whether that should be considered a suburban style or urban style or whatnot. They have these different classifications. And that informs them as to what kind of improvements in the future might be on those roads. They also identify roads that might be locally owned or maintained by a jurisdiction, and they may be identified or recommended by them through that process as to whether it should be a collector of some form, some range or style. I think they have high collector or major collector or minor collector and arterials as well. And one of the things that came out through that process was they were looking at Tropic Street as a collector road, the way it functions, based on some of the criteria that you have. Now, what we got to do with that, I don't know. We have to go through what's called an evaluation and appraisal report process. That's a 7-year cycle where we have to evaluate our comprehensive plan and come back with amendments to it, evaluating the status of our comprehensive plan to see if it's working, basically. And through that process, the state agencies look at everything that we're doing and proposing, including FDOT. And so I just anticipate they may come back with a comment about that. I'm not sure. And what we'll do about that, I don't have a good answer for you. But that was something that caught our eye when they were sharing that context classification information with us.
Yeah, so, sorry. So there, and I meant to print it out for the commissioners, but there is, on Titusville's website, it lists all of the roads and who maintains them, whether they're private, maintained by Titusville, FDOT. And so I was kind of interested in that one because it is maintained by the city of Titusville. But why FDOT would come in and possibly reclassify it. So that would be actually a good document, I think, for all of us to have, because I know that brings up we have a lot of questions of who actually maintains this road, or is it a county road, things like that. So that could be something we add to our packets as well.
Before we proceed, Brad, do we have anything, 2 or 3 things on the agenda, the next meeting, that we can add this?
You're going to have several items on your next meeting as well. So I think the next few meetings you're going to see a lot more
Is there
activity.
any time limit?
On this item?
Yeah.
There isn't a deadline. I do have action from City Council or direction from them to go ahead and schedule transmittal hearings. We did that with the bulk of the amendments, but we pulled this one out specifically because there were questions from the public. And we wanted to work with the public more to see if there was any buy-in on what was being proposed here, or maybe some potential changes that we can propose in here before bringing that up to actual scheduled transmittal hearings.
So it's not of extreme urgency?
No, sir.
Okay. Member Rogers.
I was just going to ask Brad, strategy 111 4.5, page 165. It's like a series of bullet points, lines 22 to 31. Is that new, or that's all new, or
That's new.
Where did that come from? Did you guys come up with that, or is that pulled from somewhere else?
So the consultant, when they were going through the 3 areas, the downtown, the commercial gateways, and this particular area, were trying to find some means of providing incentives to developers and property owners to see if they can redevelop their property. And usually what they were suggesting is that you need to have some incentives in there to be able to get what you want. If you want a good type of development that really benefits the city, sometimes you have to provide incentives for that with caveats. And so what they proposed here for this area was this particular strategy. And then if this is adopted, we would take this information and incorporate it in some way inside the code. So it'll be fleshed out in more detail.
I just was going to say I like it. I think it's clever, and I think it's appropriate, and I think that maybe shows a chance of being successful. Maybe, I hope. I wanted to ask what there were a couple of places where it said reserved. It looked like possibly something had been pulled out there, but you kept the number, or.
That we typically just do that just because of the issues related to renumbering policies. So we just, we're rearranging things, but instead of a lot of policies are going to stay the same as their number. Instead of one policy being changed, and then instead of putting the word reserve, we use it, then you have to renumber everything subsequent to that, and that can cause a lot of issues later on.
I will mention also that just as an editing point, on page 167, lines 24 to 26 are a duplicate of the language on page 164, lines 10 to 13.
That's correct. Yeah.
So I didn't know if you intended to do that or if you wanted to take one of those out.
Lines 24 through 26 on page 167 of your packet is intended to be reserved because that is a duplication.
Okay. Yeah. And on the map on 171, it looks like kind of all businesses except for the industrial in the upper right corner, the gray, they get pulled out of in the new plan and switched to urban mixed use. But urban mixed use does include commercial, right? It's not like there's no business allowed in that area at that point except for the heavy industrial on the corner.
Correct. The recommendation is to do a map amendment to change some areas in the study area into urban mixed-use land use. There is not a proposal to rezone property. So the code would be more like an overlay on top of all the zoning districts. So the land use will allow for a mixture of uses if a property owner or a developer chooses to propose something that is residential, commercial, or mixed use.
It doesn't
provided they
change,
meet
it
the code.
doesn't, so you're saying that's not actually a change of zoning?
Correct.
Really?
Yeah, this is.
I misunderstood that.
Yeah, so there's the comprehensive plan, which is that governing document, that growth management document with a map that shows these are the proper areas to put uses. And then underneath that, you have the implementation tools, which are the zoning districts and zoning code. We are not proposing changing anyone's zoning districts. We're only proposing to change the land use category on some properties in this study area. So it's more of an enabling language, an enabling policies. And then in order to implement that, we'll have to make changes to some regulations in the code, but we're not proposing to change any zoning districts.
Okay.
Member Faison.
Hello, Brad. So Member Moscoso had made a great point, which I hadn't looked at, which was who owns a lot of the property currently, which is the city of Titusville. And so that's public housing.
Titusville Housing Authority is a different agency from the city.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Titusville Housing Authority. Well, what I mean, but a lot of those folks are on low income or fixed income. Is Titusville Housing Authority going to move or create another area to move these people to, or are they looking for?
We don't have any information of their plans to do that. They've been made aware of this proposal. We've had a meeting with the new executive director just a few months ago about it. But we are not aware of any particular plans that they have to move people or build new housing.
Okay.
Member Garad.
A couple of comments I'd like to make just because I think they're pertinent. This area, and we've had several discussions in the past year about what the Live Local Act does. I think it would be fair to assume that you're within a mile of the building here by the City Hall, the retirement village building. And so in this area illustrated on page 170, that I'm guessing, my best guess is there is an area within that larger urban mixed use that would be within a mile. So the potential based on Live Local and back to affordable housing is you could see I don't know how tall that building is, but I guess it's 13, 14 stories, maybe more. I'm just guessing. But point being, this is an area based on that zoning district, based on Live Local, that these urban standards that are being incorporated, enhancing it, and a lot of the presentation done by the consultant, it never envisioned multiple 13-story buildings. But I believe, based on what I understand the Live Local Act provides for currently, that's exactly what could end up there. Just a point of reference, what you see is not necessarily what you get. The second, and I think more pertinent comment I have, hearing the consultant's presentation during my tenure here and seeing what the potential redevelopment of this area could be based on the presentation and now incorporating this as policies. And adding to that, your comment, Brad, about FDOT and Tropic Street. The city's embracing an urban scape of development that is going to create walkable, livable neighborhoods that are connected. That's kind of the central theme. One of the parts that I've mentioned before, and I'll reiterate that, the city really must grab hold of the fact that as it urbanizes with these types of development standards, it must also accept the responsibility and expand its level of service, meaning it can no longer take the position that you own property on the sidewalk, so you have to fix it, you have to clean it, you have to mow it, and those benches and things that are set there that are part of the scape that you've tried to create this walkable neighborhood, that you're going to make the owner under code enforcement fix that, clean that, repaint that. So the short of it is, in areas that are urbanizing, that urbanized and now deal with the event of urbanization, dense development, that the cities or even counties that had that through special taxing districts have to expand their level of service. They can't treat a main artery or collector road, Tropic Street, through the middle of this. And I think what you were trying to say, Brad, is FDOT would look at classifications, and perhaps the language has changed, but they're looking at what is probably a street maintained as a rural road standard. It's roadside ditches, it's grass, there's no curb, there's no drainage retention design, it's just a paved road. And seeing the presentation with this urbanistic look means that that road will change its character one day. It'll turn into a road that is an urban collector. It will be curb and gutter design. It will have sidewalks. That's all in the goals and policies that this is part well woven into. And my whole upshot point is city council and certainly the leadership of the city, they have to also embrace the idea they got to expand their level of service to keep up with maintaining the character you're trying to create through this policy, through these objectives. And that's just something I think is nature of when you make these presentations, the underlying footnote should always be the subscript. And oh, by the way, we need to look at our capital improvements program. We need to expand our roadway network. We need to create a new level of service. We need to maintain these urban things. We can't just adopt them as a policy and not also accept the responsibility. And I just say that from experience watching things change. I'll put a point in case that maybe would focus on this. I'm sure members here can remember driving to Walt Disney World at some point. Everybody's probably driven 192 to Walt Disney World. If you go there today, you see a very improved roadway. It's in a special taxing district. They've self-imposed this, and you've got all kinds of accessibility benefits. You got networks for bikeways, you've got pedestrian ways, you got bus stops, you got bus pull-offs. We just say it's real nice. Up until about the middle 90s, FDOT maintained 192 as they always did. That was their road as a state road, and they maintained it based on the standard. It was a rural road section. It was a 4-lane highway with drainage ditches. And the way that FDOT maintains drainage ditches on the way to Disney is those ditches get mowed every 6 months. Whether the cattails are real tall or not, every 6 months we're going to maintain it. Millions or billions of people visited Walt Disney World going down this rural road on the way, like the way the classifications worked, like they were driving a farm road. And they weren't driving a farm road. They were driving the most heavily trafficked road probably in the state with the most numbers of people visiting one site in the state or the country, Walt Disney World. Took a lot of effort, but finally they accomplished it. Now when you look at it, they've got the taxing base capable of maintaining it at a standard you appreciate. It looks like you're driving to Disney World when you go there because it's a beautiful roadway section. So my point is, and I made that earlier in one of the presentations, that as the city embraces these kind of urban designs and sees the pictures with the streets and the walkability and embraces that, the city must tackle the maintenance issue at a higher level of standard than what they have now. They cannot just, and I say that collectively, the city, it's not just a person, it's the city, has to embrace that we're an urban city and therefore we have to create a level of service representing that. That's my only footnote for that. A particular pet peeve of mine is maintenance of roads when you have pretty pictures.
I thought building heights was.
A few other things are my pet peeves, I'll admit that.
Vice Chairman Aton.
When this comes back, or whenever we discuss it again, it would be helpful to me at least if we had some kind of a bullet chart, comparison chart. It seems like there's primarily 3 zoning, or not zoning, but land use categories: the commercial high intensity, commercial low intensity, and the medium density residential, and I guess a little bit of high density residential, that are all getting converted to urban mixed use. If there was like a little chart that says, okay, this is urban mixed use and allowed, you're losing this or gaining this as you reclassify, that kind of goes to Member Rogers' comment as well, as, you know, as we're reclassifying this, it would be good to understand what the pluses and minuses are.
Member Moscoso.
Yeah, and just to speak to the live local part, I just looked it up, but most of those, if you look at the little squares, they're about 2.6 acres each. So they're not big parcels of land. And for urban mixed use, it's 15 units per acre. So let's say 2 acres. Let's say like maybe 37 units plus a bonus density, which is like 5, I think. So we're talking 40 units for 2 acres. So I don't think we're going to get really high buildings based off of this. I could be wrong, but I think that's something to consider. And Brad, you might be able to speak to that.
I think several members of the public asked a similar question or about scale. And even though you may have a maximum density allowed on a piece of property, if you can't do it, if you can't engineer it, because there are other requirements that come into play, stormwater requirements, parking requirements, whatever that might be, that might whittle down actual number of residential units you could potentially put on a piece of property. So yeah, everything else comes into play. So the starting point is something that looks at to see what their density is allowed, and then they have to look at everything else to see what they can actually do.
Absolutely.
Okay, do we have any specific time you'd recommend where we can either have a special meeting to discuss this, a workshop?
It was only a suggestion because I can bring this back at a future meeting at your choice. I want to see if I can, when I go to city council with their requested, they made a decision to go ahead and schedule transmittal hearings, but before I do that, I'd like to be able to go to that meeting and say, well, this is what the public has said, this is what the Planning and Zoning Commission has said. Obviously, if there's a scheduled transmittal hearing, you're going to have it as an official hearing before it goes to city council. So you make a formal action or recommendation to them. If there are a lot of questions about this, a lot of concerns, I was going to suggest maybe just a 1-hour workshop at 5 o'clock right before one of your regular meetings, just to talk about this particular topic. And it's not it's not a meeting where you have to make a decision. It's just providing input, and we're doing a deep dive on this. And I can also show you the draft land development regulations that complement this, that would help implement some of these policies. I do plan on having another community meeting as well.
Do you seriously think an hour is enough before a regular meeting?
It's up to you. If you want to use a regular meeting to do it, maybe at the end of one of your agenda items like tonight, we could do that too.
How does the commission feel about this? Do you want to have a workshop meeting or?
One other suggestion. We've been reaching out to all of you before each meeting to try and do a 30-minute phone call to try and answer questions. We are open to having a more in-depth conversation with you about any agenda item before then. So that might be an opportunity as well.
But I seriously think it needs to be all of us together at a workshop meeting to discuss this. Member Rogers.
I just think it'd be fine to try one meeting anyway, and a 1-hour meeting before the regular meeting, and see how that goes. And if it goes well and we still need more, we could do it again, I guess.
Member Faison.
So I have a lot of questions about this, a ton, and primarily about the displacement of the residents and what the city plans on doing. And I know right now that's not this forum because we are planning and zoning, but when we do speak on this in another forum, I have lots of questions about the city imposed gentrification and what they're going to do about displacing the residents and for those who own property. So I'm totally in favor of having another meeting, whether it's before the meeting or in this venue. That's why I didn't want to ask a lot of questions tonight because you already said, but yeah, whatever you guys decide, but I do want to have a more in-depth meeting specifically about this.
Let's go. So
Could we have someone, I don't know if it would be neighborhood services or the housing authority, come in to that meeting to answer those questions for us?
Are they even part of the conversation?
Well, I could certainly have someone from our neighborhood services department and ask them so they can participate in the conversation about this. The housing authority, I can inform them of the event and be up to them if they want to attend, because that's a different agency altogether.
Well, do you want to try a 5 o'clock meeting before our next meeting to see how that goes?
Yes.
Only if you bring balloons for Brad's birthday.
Where did balloons disappear to?
He really appreciates that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously,
Yes.
do you want to have a 5 o'clock meeting before the meeting? The next meeting, 2 weeks from now? Okay. And if something happens and a lot of items are postponed, we'll still have the meeting. Okay. Next item is petitions and requests from the public present. Seeing none, we'll go on to item 11A, Community Development Spotlight Video.
We have a video that was shown to City Council a few months ago, just a spotlight of our department and what we do. It's something that the city manager has asked us to, all the departments to do annually. So we've done a different one every year. So we'll show you this year's version.
The Community Development Department consists of the Planning Department, Development Services, the Building Department, Neighborhood Services, Economic Development, a Redevelopment Planner, Sustainability Planner, and GIS. The department is responsible for the review and approval of all development proposals in the city. The Planning Department provides review and analysis of land use and development proposals to ensure compatibility with the community standards as established by the city's comprehensive plan and land development regulations. The planners ensure the city's comprehensive plan is consistent with state requirements and analyzes land use and development patterns to maximize smart growth. The planners help develop new public policy per City Council's direction, and they facilitate public participation and community engagement in the planning process. The Redevelopment Planner implements the city's downtown redevelopment plan and budget and assists the Executive Director with the Community Redevelopment Agency. The Redevelopment Planner reviews building and design plans for conformance to the city's downtown mixed-use zoning district development standards. The Sustainability Planner implements the city's Sustainability Action Plan, including submitting grant requests that focus on resiliency and sustainable development. The Sustainability Planner also serves as the staff liaison to the Titusville Environmental Commission. As part of the city's development review process, the Sustainability Planner verifies low-impact development best management practices proposals and administers any necessary agreements for compliance with the LID ordinance. The Development Services Division serves as the centralized point of contact for all new residential, commercial, and industrial projects. Staff is responsible for conducting technical engineering reviews of all new development proposed in the city. Staff reviews site plans, landscape plans, grading plans, utility plans, drainage studies, and traffic reports related to each proposed development to ensure that all new development is conducted in compliance with the technical requirements of the city's land development regulations. The division provides technical assistance for variance requests to the Board of Adjustments and Appeals and waivers to the city's Administrative Level Development Review Committee. The Development Services Division also issues all business tax receipts, also known as occupational licenses, to businesses and certain nonprofits throughout the city. These include commercial, retail, industrial, mobile vendors, and even home-based businesses. The Building Division reviews all vertical building construction plans and permit applications, as well as issues permits for construction, redevelopment, and building improvement projects and inspections. The building official and city engineer are the city's floodplain managers and help the city maintain its community rating in FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program. The city's participation in the program helps residents and business owners obtain flood insurance. The Neighborhood Services Department has grown to a team of 7 employees and serve as the city's administrator for various federal and state grant programs related to housing, public services, community development, and revitalization strategies throughout the city. The department is tasked with developing and managing neighborhood revitalization and affordable housing strategy area plans regulated by the U.S. Department of Housing and the state of Florida, and oversees the operations of the Harry T. Moore Social Service Center and its community programs and services. The department formulates and implements the city's 5-year Community Development Block Grant Consolidated Plan, Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnership Program Annual Action Plans, and the State Housing Initiative Partnership 3-year Local Housing Assistance Plan. Additionally, the department leads the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee in the development of the city's annual Housing Incentive Plan. In addition to managing these ongoing federal and state grant programs, the department serves as administrator of several special or one-time grants relating to affordable housing and human services, such as the American Rescue Plan Act, National Opioid Settlement, Neighborhood Stabilization Program, Coronavirus, and Live Local Act programs. The department negotiates, regulates, and monitors these programs and associated subaward agreements to ensure subrecipients and funded projects are in compliance. The Economic Development Department is tasked with the strategic planning and execution of initiatives aimed at enhancing the city's economic landscape. Its duties encompass attracting new businesses through targeted outreach and development programs, supporting the expansion and retention of existing businesses, and facilitating job creation to bolster the local economy. Furthermore, the department serves as a vital liaison between the city, its business community, and other governmental entities, ensuring collaborative efforts towards economic sustainability and development. The Community Development Department is currently working on comprehensive plan amendments related to the Titusville Tomorrow project. The purpose of the project is to incentivize redevelopment in the downtown and on the city's major commercial corridors with flexible development standards and increased density in key areas. In addition, the project envisions opportunities for infill development in the Canaveral Heights neighborhood. This project should be completed by the end of 2024.
I noticed that P&Z is not mentioned. TEC is mentioned. Board of Adjustments and Appeals is mentioned, but we're not mentioned. There's no mention. This was presented to City Council last month. And, you know, it's presented just prior to budget sessions beginning. Let's be honest with you. And I think we should have been mentioned because we're twice the work of the staff than TEC or Board of Adjustments and Appeals. Any comments?
I had noticed that too. When I first saw the video, I was like, wait, they showed everyone, but I mean, that's kind of a pride thing, so I don't really think it's important, but I mean, it's nice to get recognition, but, you know, it's a video, it's promotion, I don't know. I guess we're not pretty enough for video. I'm not screen tested yet, so.
Any other discussion?
My feelings are hurt.
Okay, under reports, staff, do you have a report?
No, sir.
City Attorney?
You may or may not know that the Live Local Act glitch bill has been approved by the governor. He signed it into law and it became effective immediately. The city of Titusville has drafted a updated ordinance, and the Live Local ordinance will be presented to P&Z on June 5th.
Has it changed from what we,
There's been some changes.
There's been some tweaks, we'll call them. There's modifications, clarifications, and we've taken what the state legislature did and incorporated those changes into our city ordinance.
And Chelsea, in regard to the what we have to file every year, the form.
The financial disclosure.
Yeah, it's changed and it's,
electronic.
yeah. Is it more complicated or is it
It's the same form, but it's electronic.
But it has to be turned in by,
So the advice that's given by this department is to fill it out as soon as possible, because in the month of June, there may be a delay if you have phone call questions where you need to call and get assistance. And so to avoid any delays in the month of June, because the deadline is July 1st, the advice is to do it as soon as possible. And if you have questions, call me.
okay, under Chairperson's report, thank you for living with me with this, nasal stuff I've had. And
didn't notice.
yeah, I bet you didn't.
There are a lot worse problems that you got, Joe.
Any members' report? Any member reports?
I have a question. Since Live Local came up, We were very concerned about applications and things over the past several months. Is there any projects currently submitted that are Live Local?
We have one site plan that is in formal review. We have not received responses to our first round of comments. We have also met formally with 2 other potential applicants, but they have not formally submitted an application yet. So potentially 3 properties.
Yeah.
Member Charles.
About the, Live Local, the county just had a meeting, what was it, Tuesday? And they discussed, one of the changes was the property tax exemption for, you can elect to not exempt property under a certain section of the Live Local Act. It's basically the one where it says if you have enough low affordable housing in the area, you can be exempt. And then the county did an assessment of how much affordable housing they had, and they said that according to that, they could go ahead and exempt themselves from this tax exemption. So I don't know if that's, I can send you, it's under section 196.1978, 3D, and then 1A, but I think that's what it was, yeah. I took a picture of it because I was like, I didn't know. I know they did their own assessment, so I wasn't sure if that was applicable to us or not, or if that's something that we at least want to discuss or not, because the county just voted on it. I think they approved exempting themselves or exempting the county from that part of it, from the tax exemption. So just FYI.
Anything else? We do want to welcome Member McLaughlin, representing the school board. This is about average length of meetings. Some are much shorter, some are much longer. If there's no other items, we stand adjourned.